All right, today's the sixth day in our seven-part series on money mistakes that Hannah and I have made in our marriage. And today's mistake is sort of the other side of the double-edged sword that is miscommunication, and it's about assumptions. Really, it's about assumptions when it comes to prioritizing certain things. And just because you deem something to be the most important thing with money doesn't mean your spouse does, and you shouldn't assume they do. And this gets us in trouble often because we think to ourselves, well, it's so obvious that this is the most important thing. Why would we even need to talk about that? But what seems obvious to you definitely is not always obvious to your spouse. This has gotten us in a lot of trouble more than once, but I'll give you a simple example from especially early in our marriage. So remember, we got married, young, and we didn't have a lot of money at the time. And to me, when it came to things like groceries and household supplies like paper towels or toilet paper or something like that, the most important thing was keeping it as cheap as possible. I basically wanted to save as much money as possible on these things and live the same way that I had been living as a broke college student. And I just assumed that Hannah felt the same way. But to Hannah, keeping things cheap, it was important. She didn't want to spend a ton of money, but it was not the number one priority. And there were definitely certain foods or household items that it was important to Hannah that we get the healthier or more quality versions. Basically, she was more willing to spend money on healthy foods, whereas I was really, willing to skimp on healthy items to try and save a dollar or two. And this would have been fine if we had talked about this. We could have, found a healthy middle ground. But instead, we just assumed the other person's number one was our number one. And so, of course, this led to a number of money fights around grocery spending and me thinking it was way too high and Hannah thinking we were already trying to go, super cheap, and already she was sacrificing a lot of, some healthier, more quality options. You got to remember, Hannah is especially a much longer term thinker when it comes to our health. She was trying to keep us healthy and eating healthy and making sure we're not, doing sort of bad things to ourselves long term. Whereas, especially early on in our marriage, I was willing to eat, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for 3 meals a day, if that's what it took to save a buck. The bottom line is that, obviously, different people are different. So, of course, we're going to see things differently and have different ideas and opinions and thoughts and priorities when it comes to any given purchase. So, the key is don't simply assume that your spouse will find most important the exact same thing that you find most important. That's very rarely going to happen. So, take some time, actually ask the question, what do they find most important about this category of spending? And then what do I find most important about this category of spending, and is there a way for us to meet in the middle? Do that as much as you can on the front end and save yourself a lot of money fights on the back end.